Good morning, beautiful wives. We are here with day 15. It's called Fear Not, from Wife After God, drawing closer to God and to your husband. All right, so we have a lot of scripture today. I'm going to read some of them with you, and the passages that are a little bit longer, I'm going to let you read on your own. Okay? All right, so first one, Isaiah 41:10. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. Psalm 56:3. But when I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. All right, so Matthew 14:22-31. I'm going to let you read that on your own, just for the sake of time in our video not becoming so long. But it's really about when Peter walks on the water. But please do read because the details are important. All right, so Deuteronomy 5:29 is next. Oh, that they would always have hearts like this, that they might fear and obey all of my commands. And if they did, they and their descendants would prosper forever. Amen. Joshua 1:9. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And Hebrews 11:1. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things that we cannot see. 1 Peter 5:8. Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. All right, so there is a few things that I would like to touch on briefly on the scriptures. So Hebrews 11:1, faith shows the reality of what it's hoped for, and it is the evidence of what we cannot see. So I want us to meditate on this for a second, because if you notice, faith is a reality of what we hope for. What are we hoping for? Because whatever we're hoping for, whatever we are believing for, it becomes our reality, because faith is a reality. So faith shows the reality that's in our heart, right? So whatever we hope for, and this is so deep, and it's so important that we understand, because whatever it is that we hope for, it, that it shows up as a reality in our life, and that's faith. So what is it that we're putting our faith on? Because faith is something that's faith is something that becomes concrete as it becomes a reality, because that's what we hope for. Does that make sense? So it is the evidence of what cannot be seen, right? So if we are hoping for always, like that saying that they say, well, I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? So that is a hope. Whether we understand that or not, that's the hope of our hearts, that the other shoe will drop, right? So that becomes our faith, and that becomes our reality. And that reality is the evidence of things that cannot be seen. The shoe has not dropped yet, but because you're hoping that it will in your heart, it becomes your reality, and that reality becomes the evidence of what before we couldn't see. Does that make sense? So this is so profound, and it's so important that we understand, because whatever it is that is the hope of our heart becomes our reality. So if we renew our minds to always hope for the best, that becomes our reality. And that's the good news, because faith is evidence. Faith turns the hope of our heart into a reality that is an evidence of our lives. So it is so profound. What are we hoping for in our hearts? What is it that we are constantly looking for next? Are we afraid that, something bad is going to happen? Are we afraid that the outcome of situations may always be unfavorable? Are we, and perhaps it's not that fear that grasps you and paralyzes you. Perhaps it's just a very subtle feeling that, oh man, I can't, like everything is so great right now, but I can't, like I have a feeling something bad is going to happen. Why do you have that feeling? Some people call it discernment and reality. It's just fear, guys. It's faith in the wrong thing. It's hope in the wrong thing, because we can always choose what we put our hope on. We can always choose what we put our faith on. So we can always choose the reality that's coming and the evidence that it's being made for our lives by what we hope for. The other day someone told me, we can't always live in happy and rainbows, and my answer is, I understand that the world we live in may not always be happy and rainbows. However, we can live in that reality because that is a higher reality. That's the reality of heaven for our lives, that is always happy and rainbows. And will there be troubles? Yes, absolutely, right? The word says that in this world you will have trouble, but it also says, but be courageous, be strong, be perseverant because I have overcome the world. Jesus says that, right? So if he overcame, so can we, because we're made in his image and we are empowered and strengthened by him, So what are we putting our hopes on? Because that becomes our reality. All right, so that was a very long comment. I did not expect it to be that long. That was actually something else that I wanted to say as well about 1 Peter 5:8. Stay alert. Watch out for the enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone who can devour. And I hope you understand that this tells you two things. Three things actually. There is an enemy, and it's the devil. It's not our husbands, okay? But you already knew that. So he prowls around like a lion. That means that he's not a lion, right? He's a fake. He is a fake. Like he's already defeated. He's already, like completely dead. And he's around like a lion, meaning he tries to be scary and he tries to be loud, but really he's not. That's not who he is. He is defeated. So let's make sure that we treat him as who he is, defeated, under our feet. Okay? And then looking for someone to devour. So if he's looking for someone to devour, what that tells me is that he cannot devour just anybody he sees, right? So what is it that makes some people eligible to be devoured and some not? I think that's a question we can spend some time meditating with the Lord. God, in my marriage, is there something that makes it eligible to be devoured by the enemy? That's a good question for us to ask. Is there anything in my marriage? Is there anything in my life that it's making me or my husband or us eligible to be devoured by the devil? Because some people he can devour, some he cannot. Some areas of our lives he can devour, some he cannot. That's what it's saying in 1 Peter 5:8. So I wanted to touch bases on those two things because I thought that was so profound and I love those scriptures. Okay, so this is talking about fear and it's saying fear not, right? I could go on this theme today like forever, for an entire year, and it's just so amazing because when we first see the word fear in the Bible and it sets a precedence, right? Every time you see something in the Bible for the first time, it sets a precedence. It's the principle of first mention, and every time that it's talked about afterwards, it's in reference to that very first time. That's hermeneutics, and that's how we interpret the Bible without any other resources other than the Bible itself. So the first time that fear is mentioned, it's not mentioned as a feeling. It is mentioned as a spirit. Okay, so what I want us to understand is that fear is a spirit. However, when that spirit has influenced our lives for so long, it generates feelings in us that are corresponding to that spirit. After that spirit has been influencing us for so long, those feelings are embedded, like they are rooted there, and it becomes a stronghold. And the enemy, that spirit of fear, which comes from the devil, which is the enemy, doesn't even need to be there anymore because it's already there as a stronghold. Does that make sense? So perhaps you have gone through delivery and you have been delivered from the spirit of fear, but there are strongholds that were made by that spirit that is still there, and it manifests as feelings, as emotions, and as behaviors in our lives. And those are the things that we are dealing with, unless you're still under the influence of that spirit. But anyways, those are the things we're dealing with, and so it's important that we understand that every spirit comes with feelings behind it, and those feelings stay as strongholds unless we deal with it, unless we do something about it, So it's important that, and it's not to say that the enemy and as the spirit of fear is never going to come against us anymore. It will, but it's important for us to be able to recognize if there is a spirit still attached to it and we need to be delivered from it, or is this just a feeling that I need to deal with as a stronghold that needs to come down? Does that make sense? So I just wanted to mention that because I think that's important. All right, so she's talking about a little bit about the story of Peter walking over the waters, how yes, fear led him to come down under the water, but that story also reveals the faith that it required for him to step out of the boat to begin with, right? So fear and faith are very close, except that faith is is rooted in love, and fear is rooted in fear. Fear is the root. So anyways, fear, she says, fear, worry, and doubts intimidates you from the miracle of intimacy. I thought that was important to mention because I don't know that we always realize that fear and worry of any kind will keep us from intimacy, because intimacy requires vulnerability, and fear will keep us from being vulnerable, and being vulnerable is not just sharing our weaknesses, it's sharing our strengths too. Sometimes it's harder for us to share our strength in humility than it is for us to share our weakness, because that becomes sometimes false humility, right? So this is important for us to know, because vulnerability, a lot of people have it confused. It's like, okay, I'm sharing all of my difficulties, all of my misery, and that's being vulnerable. No, not really, because that could be very much done in the spirit of pride, hidden behind false humility, so we have to be careful with that, because that's not what vulnerability is. Vulnerability is us allowing ourselves to be fully known and fully seen for who we are, and first of all, to ourselves, when we come before God and we ask him, God, show me what's in my heart, show me, allow me to fully see myself and to fully know myself for who I am, he will show us, and sometimes it's beautiful and sometimes not so much, but allowing ourselves to be fully known and fully seen by our husbands, by the people around us, by our children, by the people who are close with us, that's vulnerability, and that's hard. Let me tell you, it is much harder than just sharing the problems that we have in life, because that is not hard, actually. So anyways, fear can also be defined as having reverence or awe. And I love this part because it says the only fear you should experience is through honoring God. So fear and the fear of God, fear of being afraid, the spirit of fear and the fear of God are two completely different things, you know. Fear, I would suggest, is the counterfeit of the fear of the Lord, you know. So, anyways, spend some time on that. The fear of God is what keeps us from sinning. The fear of God is what keeps us from sinning because we are terrified to be separated from Him. And sin is the only thing that separates us from God. So I would suggest you spend some time meditating on that. Then she has a prayer. Really, almost none of what I said today is part of the devotional, really, but it's just things that the Lord spoke to me about the theme of today, you know, and how important it is for us to live in the fear of God, away from the spirit of fear and all of its crap, so that we can have intimacy in our marriage. Does that make sense? It is such a beautiful theme that I love so much. So anyways, the challenge for today from the book is don't let fear cripple your marriage. Find a special way to experience an adventure with your husband. This could be as simple and as an intimate conversation. You know, not sometime, in the beginning of last year, my husband and I think I've mentioned this to you, and I'm sorry, this is like the longest video ever. I think I mentioned it to you that, you know, we had a crisis in our marriage. We had like some very serious things happening. And, you know, we had a lot to grow and overcome. And it was a season of a lot of pain, but yet so much growth and fruit for us, you know. And when we were coming out of that season and when we were working on reestablishing our intimacy, you know, beginning with emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy, that was the part that had been affected in our marriage. Really, it wasn't the other part. But anyways, when we were doing that, we got some cards, and if I'm not at my house, as you know, otherwise I would show it to you, but I'll show you some other time. It's called reconnecting, something like that. So they're just little conversation cards, you know, and they promote really intimate and deep conversations, you know. And we would go out on dates almost every other day, really. And we would just sit, you know, we would go sometimes after work, sometimes after church, sometimes just, you know, whenever we had the opportunity, and we would sit for hours at this restaurant that we like, and just have some wine and talk over those cards, you know. And we got to know parts of each other, and even ourselves that we had never tapped into before, you know. And we had some of our deepest conversations that came out of those simple questions that the cards had, because we really made it a point to be intentional about it, you know. So I highly suggest that if you don't know what to talk about intimately, just get something that would help you promote those conversations, you know. If you go to Amazon and you just type, you know, intimate conversation for couples, it will give you a lot of options of conversation cards, or even books that have like a bunch of questions. You know, we have equipped ourselves with a lot of resources, devotionals, cards, you know, books, and a lot of different things that promote good conversations, that promote emotional intimacy for us. You know, I think that's the hardest part of intimacy, is emotional intimacy, you know, because it requires a level of vulnerability that a lot of people are not used to. So anyways, that was that. And now finally, the 3 questions for journaling. Number 1, in what instances has God invited you to do something, but you were too scared to follow through? Number 2, what things cause you to fear? And number 3, how does operating in fear affect your marriage? All right, so that was that for today. It was a very long video today, but I think it's good. This really spoke to me, and there was a lot of things I wanted to share, and like I said, I could be here for another year. I love you all, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next day. Bye-bye.